Hey everybody, Tosan here, bringing you a guide for soloing Dire Maul North tribute runs. The whole point of this, of course, is to easily farm a bunch of gold for yourself as a hunter in Classic WoW. I'm not too sure if there's already a bunch of guides out there for this. I haven't really stumbled upon many myself, but it doesn't hurt to have an extra one, right? So I'm going to walk through what you're going to need first to start these runs. And let me just say, you can farm a lot of gold quickly doing this. It's very repeatable, and all you need is yourself and a few tools. So these are the main items you're going to need to be able to do these runs continuously. Get multiple stacks of lesser invisibility potions, and multiple stacks of large Sephorium charges. If all things go well, you should be using just one of each of these per run. Of course, the runs aren't always going to go perfectly, so I'd also recommend having one stack, or at least just a handful, of the larger invisibility potions. They're a little more expensive, but they have a separate cooldown from the lesser ones. So let's say you use a lesser invisibility potion and then die shortly after because something went wrong, like feign death resisting. Well, then you can run back and pick up where you left off without having to wait for that 10-minute cooldown to finish. And lastly, lots of that good mage water. Next is the recommended talents. Now, you don't need a perfect talent build to do these runs at all. You can use whatever your normal raid or PvP build is and get away with it for the most part. However, you're definitely going to have a much easier time doing these runs if you use a talent build like this. A talent build like this is going to make the runs faster, more efficient, and safer. The key talents to consider with this build are improved feign death and pathfinding, as well as the talents that make your pet a bit tankier. The rest doesn't really matter that much. Deterrence is also super good to have. But the main reason you go this build is because without pathfinding, the lesser invisibility potions only last 15 seconds, and there's going to be a lot of scenarios where you're either going to cut it super close with the potion, or you might actually get aggro and die at the end of the potion when it wears off. So pathfinding makes it to where you can use the invisibility potion and never get caught out of it. The other thing, naturally, is improved feign death is going to reduce the amount of times your feign death gets resisted, and therefore reduce the amount of times you die. One thing that I can tell you is, most of the time when your feign death gets resisted on your way to the boss, it's going to lead to a death. There's not much you can do about it in a lot of the scenarios. There are some ways around it, and sometimes you can survive, but for the most part, a feign death resist before you get to the boss means you're gonna die. Feign death resisting on the boss is a lot more manageable, and it's definitely possible to survive. But still, the less often it happens, the better, so highly recommend that talent unless you want to rip your hair out. Another benefit of this build is your pet is going to die fairly often, so having the improved revive pet is also going to make life a bit easier, as well as making the runs faster and less frustrating. Now, if you're concerned about having to respec to this and then go back to your main spec for raiding or PvP back and forth to do this farming, don't worry about it too much, because if you're doing these runs efficiently, you're going to make way more than enough gold to justify respecing. Although, I would obviously recommend if you take this talent build to farm DM, you probably want to farm DM for a few days to get your money's worth before you have to respec. So you don't have to emulate exactly everything I do here. Sometimes you can wait for certain patrols if you don't want to rush it and skip them, but I'm impatient, so a lot of the time I will just skip through as fast as I can. I also don't want the video to be super long, so I don't want to show you the huge variety of things that you can do to go through these runs, but not everything is going to be exactly the same. This ogre here, you can either wait for him to patrol away, or you can scatter shot him and then jump up on this ledge. I do miss that jump many times, and sometimes I have to feign death to get the ogre off of me when the scatter wears off. One little handy trick you can do is, if you have a Gyro Freeze Ice Reflector, you can equip that for this next pull. If there are 2 caster ogres and 1 melee, then you can use the reflector, scatter the melee, and reflect the frost bolts from the others and just breeze past them. If it's not 2 caster mobs, then just use your pet to aggro them away. Then once you get up here, feign death, and then go loot the key out of the box. This key is for the door that you see straight ahead. Now, to get past this one guard ogre on the side and the guard ogre plus dogs on the lower ledge, you want to try to do a little pathing trick where you can go between these 2 pillars and not aggro any of them, and then jump up this ledge for safety just in case. Fun fact, this ledge is a safe spot. Any mobs that do happen to aggro to you, you can just stand here until they eventually de-aggro and then just continue on. Now use that shiny key to open up the door. Now, one thing that is crucial, bread and butter tactic for getting through here, is using your pet to aggro mobs and then run away. So what you do is you put your pet on stay, where you want him to retreat to, and then once you send him in with dash to aggro, then you hit pet passive. You can either re-keybind pet passive, because who the heck presses Control 0, or you can make a macro. It doesn't matter, just put it on passive, and your pet will retreat back to the place you told him to stay, thus pulling the mobs back with him. Now sometimes those caster mobs will change target as you're passing by them, so you want to be careful for that and maybe scatter them, or at least toggle off cheetah so you don't get dazed. Ideally, you want to outrun the range of your pet and he'll just despawn automatically and you won't have to bother reviving him, and you can just simply resummon him. Here, I put my pet on stay. Make sure to kill the Eye of Kilrog, by the way. The Eye of Kilrog will summon these really annoying Nether Walkers. They're like Void Walkers and they destroy you. So they're very annoying and you're not even immune to them when you get the King buff. The Eye of Kilrog pretty much dies in 2 shots. You can just Arcane Shot, Auto Shot them and they die. So here I put my pet on stay in the middle of the hallway and I target the bug that you can see just through that doorway on the far left side of the doorway. This will help your pet line of sight when he pulls aggro inevitably. Now, sometimes your pet doesn't pull aggro even if he runs straight through this pack of mobs, which is really annoying. Ideally, you want your pet to dash through and pull aggro on that ogre pack, and then pull the bugs, and then hit your pet passive macro and send him back to that location. Sometimes he doesn't aggro them on the way in, so I'd suggest putting him to a point where he could just run right through the middle of them to increase the odds of him doing that. Now make sure you see your pet actually aggro the bugs. Once your pet hits the first bug once, all the rest of the bugs will shortly after follow and aggro on your pet, because they're all pretty much linked. Now, sometimes your pet will survive here and sometimes it'll die. Most of the time it should survive depending on when the ogre's aggro, and there's a bunch of RNG factors involved. I'd say my pet survives here and I just outrange him and despawn him probably 75% of the time, but sometimes he dies, that's just how it goes. Get around this corner, feign death to drop aggro. Now watch for this guard patrolling here. For the record, you don't need to be a night elf. Where I'm standing right here is actually safe from his aggro range. I just do it as a safety net, but you can always stay out of his aggro range if you just, pay attention to his pathing. Now, you want to make sure to kill this Eye of Kilrog. I mean, it is possible to bypass it, just let it pass you by with feigned death and completely skip doing it. But I think it's just safer to kill it, in my opinion, so I prefer to do that. Once your scatter and feigned death are back up, scatter the first ogre on the left and concussive shot the other ogre. Then make sure to feign death right by this edge of this ramp where you're out of line of sight. And then once you de-aggro with feign, chug your invisibility pot and haul ass upstairs. Now make sure you have aspect of the cheetah on, and this is the part where I mentioned the pathfinding talent comes in handy, because as you can see with the extra 6% speed, it ends right when you get up here. Again, it's possible to do it without pathfinding, but it is a real butt clincher. Here you want to respawn or revive your pet, put him on stay at about this location. Once he's healed up and ready to go, you can run up here, sick your pet on that first ogre by the door, and then get ready to send your pet on the other ogre to the right. Sometimes your pet will aggro the pack to the right just running in which case you can just put him back on passive. Otherwise, just make sure he aggroes both packs before you send him on passive. Now, he'll just do the tanking while you blow up this door with your large Sephorium charge. Again, sometimes your pet dies here, sometimes you can despawn it. I usually hug that wall there to get him to despawn. So he did barely survive here. So then, feign death around this corner, get your pet back and healthy, put him on stay right here, and you're going to do the same thing. Send your pet into aggro, and then once he has aggro on this pack, put him on passive and send him all the way back. Now I mentioned these casters sometimes change targets. You don't want to get dazed, so just scatter and then maybe concussive him. Once you get to Fat Boy up here, pop Deterrence and Aspect of the Monkey and just walk right by him and feign death. Now, there are multiple ways to do this point of the run. You can also just feign around that corner in front of Crom Crush and send your pet past Crom Crush to this Captain Pack and aggro all of them at once and send them back. Either way works. I just prefer doing it this way. I've had a few weird scenarios where my pet gets two-shot by them on the way back and then I get aggro. Or as I'm running by the captains, my pet gets feared or I get feared, and I just feel a lot safer doing it this way. Same routine here, make sure to put Aspect of the Cheetah back up, put your pet on stay. I send my pet on this first pack, and then I send him to the right for just a second, and then I put him on passive. Sometimes these dogs are patrolling here, depending on how fast you go. I almost always have the dogs in this general area. I don't feel like waiting for them to patrol, so I'll just chuck an iron grenade and maybe a scatter at them so I can breeze right past them. I prefer to go as fast as I can, so I'm impatient and don't like to wait for them to patrol around. However you want to do it is fine. Sometimes the dogs are closer to that first ogre pack, and your pet will also aggro the dogs with the ogres, in which case you can save yourself an iron grenade, but iron grenades are cheap, so I don't mind using them here and there. Now, if you beat the dogs to their first patrol route, the dogs will go in a circle around this platform. So you have to be careful not to aggro them when you pull the boss, because once the bosses get in range of those dogs, it will pull them, and that's just annoying to deal with. You can totally manage to kite them on the same pattern with your pet and kill them as well. But what I like to do is mark them with a raid icon, and that way I can pay attention to their patrolling and not let the bosses get in range. So where I'm standing right here at the back of this platform is where I want my pet to be. So I'm going to Eyes of the Beast and use my pet to aggro the boss. Click off Eyes of the Beast and it will outrange it and auto despawn your pet. Then put your pet on stay behind this wall. Now your pet is going to be who these two bosses keep going back and forth to every time you feign death, and this gives you a nice little kiting path. So I'm going to let them come up here. I send my pet in to maybe eat the ogre's first charge. It doesn't always work, but sometimes he'll charge your pet, give a little damage, and then send your pet back. Once you put your pet on passive, he'll go back. Now look at the dogs. This is why raid icon marked them, because the dogs, if they get too close to the bosses, they will pull. Now, once the dogs patrol full circle and go down the ramp, you don't have to worry about them, because in all likelihood, unless you have really bad gear, you should kill the boss before the dogs patrol again. So be careful while you're line of sighting the mage, also not to pull the dogs from behind. It can be a little risky. You can do it around the pillar, but sometimes I like to just jump down here just to play it safe. Now, I know the dogs are almost done with their patrol path, but I'm going to feign death and send the boss back. Now, the beginning is a little annoying because your strategy here is to DPS the boss as much as you can once he gets close to your pet. That way you can just pump as much damage as you can. But also you want to be Viper Stinging the caster as much as you can as well. Don't let either of these guys get behind that corner and get to your pet, because although it is possible to recover from that and your pet won't instantly die, if you are unsafe with that strategy too often, your pet will die and you'll probably have to reset the fight, which is annoying. So here's your routine. Try to keep the bosses as close together as you can. That way you can get the most drinking done. And then, get a bunch of mana back, get back up here, and damage them before they reach your pet. Rinse, repeat over and over. It's going to be harder to pump maximum DPS on the king and get as many aim shots and multi-shots and whatever in as possible while the caster has mana. So the fight gets a lot easier to manage once the caster's out of mana. So it's as simple as doing this routine over and over. Now, notice that they're not very close together, the two bosses. They're pretty separate. So I'm going to have to stop drinking earlier than I'd like to protect my pet. And I actually do it a little late. I should have done a distracting shot first there, because now he's out of line of sight and he's going to start casting on my pet. So I have to try to jump and distracting shot him and then shoot the boss so they don't kill my pet. So that was a little risky. So one thing you have to be careful with, when the caster still has mana to cast with, if you're in his line of sight, he's going to stop and try to channel a cast, and that's going to slow him down and separate him from the boss too much. If these two guys are too separated, it's going to make it very hard for you to get plenty of mana back when you drink. Now, one tip is on this lower ledge here, you're out of line of sight from those spirits that are up top. So you can actually eat and drink down here without re-entering combat. Though, the downside is you have to run all the way back around to get up to the upper ledge to shoot them properly. So if you don't really need to eat, I would recommend trying to drink on the top level, just so you can get more ticks of mana before you get to shooting again. Now, when the boss makes his path all the way back around, you can get a couple of shots in, like a multi-shot auto shot, and then feign death, but sometimes he's going to get his charge off and knock you to the lower level, which is a little annoying, but it's not the end of the world. Now, every once in a while, when he charges you, he'll hit you with a huge mortal strike and nearly kill you. I haven't died to it yet, but man, if I had a few hundred less HP, I might have, so it's pretty scary. So you gotta be careful with doing that. You don't need to do it. It's just trying to get some extra damage in. But this is the routine. Once the caster is as you can see, it's a lot easier to pump your full DPS rotation into this guy and even get 1 or 2 aim shot, multi-shot combos off. Now, when you're chasing him up that ramp, make sure not to go further than the point you're seeing me at right now, because if you go too far away from your pet, you might accidentally despawn him, and then it becomes a huge ordeal. But this is the gist of it. Just rinse, repeat. Drain the caster's mana, kite them back and forth, drink your mana back, and pump into this guy as much as you can. Try not to let your pet die. So do this over and over until the boss is dead. And also when the boss gets low on health, of course, he starts running slower, which makes it even easier to finish him off. But once the boss is dead, the caster will de-aggro on you. You don't want to kill the caster because leaving him alive means more loot in the box for you. So once you've killed the boss, loot his junk so you can vendor it. And then, before you loot the tribute chest, make sure to go over to Crom Crush and talk to him and send him away with that dialogue. Doing this will add another blue item to the chest. Or sometimes you get a stupid recombobulator pattern in place of a blue, but that doesn't happen very often. So talk to him and send him away, and you'll get an extra item in the box. Talk to Mizzle, get the buff, and then tell him to drop the tribute chest, and look what goodies are inside. Now, you can sell these items. This makes your gold per hour farming a lot better. Loot all the other junk to vendor and the potions which you can put on the auction house. And then when it comes to the blues, if there's any good items in there that are sellable, you can advertise them for sale in World Chat. And anybody interested can meet you at the entrance, pay you at the entrance, and then you guide them through. And I can also show you how to do that. The most valuable items and the ones that are most worth selling are, of course, the Tarnished Elven Ring and the Rod of the Ogre Magi. Those are the two major sellers. It's possible to sell the other items, but it's pretty hard to get buyers for the other items, so usually I just loot them and vendor them. If you just vendor everything and you don't get anything worth selling, you can still make a pretty good chunk of gold. Not to mention the health and mana potions you can also throw up on the auction house and get a decent amount of gold for those as well, and you get stacks of potions pretty quickly doing these runs. Now, once you've found a buyer for some of the loot, once they zone in, first you're going to want to zone out of the instance and then zone back in to drop the crown buff that protects you from every mob. Once he's inside, have him pay you at the entrance and then give him an invisibility potion. If he's a stealther, he doesn't need an invisibility potion, and technically hunters don't either, but it's a lot safer because, you know, some people can screw it up even if it's really easy. But if they're a non-stealther, give him an invisibility pot. And then most of the mobs are going to be passive even without the crown buff. Only a handful of mobs are going to aggro at this point. That first pack there on the left will aggro, so avoid that. Most of the mobs throughout the instance will not aggro though. So just tell them to follow you and tell them to save the invisibility potion for later, and you'll tell them when to use it. The guard NPCs, the little mini bosses, and Crom Crush will aggro, so I like to mark them and guide them around. I'm taking a very safe, wide route because this guy is not level 60 that I'm guiding through. Now these mobs won't aggro, but keep in mind, the Eye of Kilrogs will respawn. Sometimes they're passive, but most of the time you're gonna have to kill them all over again. This time we're lucky and they were passive, but check them. If there's a sword icon over them and you can shoot them, make sure to kill them, because if they summon those Void Walkers, you're gonna be in trouble. This time we were lucky and it was passive. One thing I forgot to mention in that last clip, or the clip that I'm using as an example, I already killed the bugs. So if you have like a mage in your group, he can make it easy, but what I like to do is before the buyer even arrives, I like to kill these bugs. So the way to do this effectively is Explosive Trap, Feign Death, Explosive Trap. But I usually use an Iron Grenade for good measure because double explosive won't always entirely kill them. So preset an Explosive Trap. Use your pet to gather them up first. You want them all stacked up, kind of kite your pet back a little, and once they get stacked, drag them into the Explosive Trap, Iron Grenade, and then another Explosive Trap, and then just finish off the stragglers. Once you're done with that, you don't have to worry about those later. Once you get here, after the eye is dead, or you make sure it's passive, tell him to chug an invisibility potion and run upstairs. After he's nice and clear, you can do the same strat you used before, and scatter the first one and concussive shot the second one, and then just feign death your way up here. None of the rest of the mobs up on these platforms are going to aggro, so it's, you know, not like before where you had to use an invisibility potion. Got unlucky and feign death resisted here. Sometimes that happens, so I'm just going to kite and CC these guys a bit to buy time for feign death to come back up. I try to make sure to keep them away from him so they don't randomly aggro on him. So I'm just going to survive with deterrence and then feign death, and this time it works. That doesn't usually happen, but you know, RNG is fun. So, once you get to this hallway, now you're going to use your pet to aggro these two melee. Only the two melee are now a threat, so it's really easy to get past this point. Just use your pet, aggro them, and then you both run straight to Mizzle. And now once you and your buyer get to Mizzle, you can both get the crown buff and become immune to everything, and those ogres will de-aggro. The reason killing the Eyes of Kilrog and not letting them summon the blue boys on your way in here the first time and on your way in the second time is so important is because the crown buff will not protect you from them, and they hurt. They can kill you pretty easily. So once you make it there and you get the buff, he loots the chest, and he already paid you at the front door, so he now gets to loot his item or items, and he's happy and can leave. Or you can be a nice guy and let him get the buffs on his way out. The last thing to check for before you even bring a buyer here, though, is for the Dusty Tomes. There are 3 locations Dusty Tomes can spawn. Now, I've never gotten anything good from them. The class books for the trinket are not really worth anything anymore on my server. They're pretty garbage, but I guess there's always a chance at a Forer's Compendium, which is still worth a lot. So I'll show you the 3 locations for the Dusty Tome. Now remember, there's no guarantee they spawn, there's just a chance. And there's only a chance there'll even be anything useful in it. So this is the first spawn location, is right here, right next to where the Caster Ogre is sitting. The second location will be right here underneath that ramp by the pile of bones. And the last tome location, when you're leaving this hallway, the one with the first Eye of Kilrog in the courtyard, it's going to be near this bush in the southwest corner of the courtyard. So you never know, there might be a Forer's Compendium of Dragon Slaying in there, which is worth a lot, so it's always good to check them on the way out just in case. Alright, and since I only showed one example to guide through, I'm just going to show one more very fast speed example of a full run. It's going to be at 300% speed, so it should go pretty quick. Alright guys, that is it for this guide on how to solo Dire Maul tributes as a hunter in Classic WoW. Remember, it can be frustrating to learn how to do this smoothly and efficiently. You might die many, many times before you succeed, but once you get it down, you're going to be farming mad money. So don't give up. Anyway, thanks for watching and peace out.